Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to this special 4K edition of the Q&A. There's no reason that it's 4K other than I'm just trying out some new equipment. I'm still running the Sony a6300 with a 35mm lens through the HDMI output live into an Elgato Camlink 4K. Now, I tried the original Camlink last year and I had some major problems with it. But for this one, the 4K edition, all I did was plug it into a USB hub. That was it. No installation, no messing with that stupid software, and it just works right in OBS. So this is supposed to be recorded in 4K 24, so 24 frames per second. There should be no interlacing, but I won't be as smooth flowing as normal 60 FPS. And I'm also trying a new USB Sound Blaster audio card, which I'm probably going to return it because Firebrand X told me to. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. I trust that guy's opinion when it comes to audio equipment. But I wanted to try it out as well just to have an alternative. And it has a bunch of different inputs and outputs, which is helpful. So for $100 though, I'm not sure if it's perfect. But either way, a new equipment test, I always want to share it with my supporters first because many of us are all crazy nerds with all of these things, not just video games. And we all appreciate the behind-the-scenes weirdness like this. So let me know what you think of audio and video. If the video and audio are consistently out of sync, that's fine. I can fix that. I think I have it tweaked right, but whatever. But if it's constantly varying in and out of sync, that's a problem. Most of the time, that's actually a YouTube problem, but any of my fellow video nerds would be able to help me out with that. If you see it, let me know, and that's definitely an issue with the Camlink or this Sound Blaster card or something. But anyway, let's see how 4K Q&As go, and let me know through any of the support apps what you think. Patton Thompson said he has a bunch of good consumer CRTs and a PVM, but is really debating on going on a quest for the Holy Grail, one of the BVM 24 or 32s. In some of the comparison photos he's seen, the BVM scan lines are really thick. The question is twofold. Are the BVMs really worth it? And is it really that much better in person? And second, what's the best balance of TV line and screen size? So, all of those questions are really preference. If you're simply talking mathematically speaking, the best is any of the 1,000-line BVMs because no one's ever been able to fit that much in as small of a tube. And in fact, I believe the 900 TVL 14-inch BVMs are I guess technically the tightest packed tubes that were ever released. But it's really about a balance of what your eyes like. And my opinions do change on things like that sometimes. Like I spent a long time the past few weeks looking at Neo Geo through a capture card on a flat screen monitor while I was doing editing. And then when I went over to my BVM D32, it didn't look right because I was so used to seeing it, just no scan lines. But then I have an upcoming video, I'll explain the details another time, but I have another way to play Neo Geo that's on a 13-inch CRT. That's, it is basically only consumer grade, but it's a higher, it's not like a 200 TVL, it's probably a 400. And I loved it. I liked it better than the BVM. So maybe that was because that's how I've always seen Neo Geo games on a stand-up arcade cab or, which is close to a consumer CRT. Or maybe it was just the contrast from staring at it on a flat screen to staring at it on the BVM to going to that. I don't know. But that's obviously all preference. My advice that I give to people is if you're, first and foremost, if you have a tube, you've already won. It's just how much more you could win from there. And it sounds like the ones that you have are awesome. My next advice is for things like light gun games and the Sega and Nintendo 8-bit 3D games, the bigger the better. So your 36-inch Trinitron might actually be, at least in my opinion, better for light gun and 3D games than your 600 TVL PVM. But overall, I found that the exact PVM that you have, the 20M2, you have a 20MDU, I just have a 20M2U. I'm sure it's the same. Yours is probably just the white case instead of the gray. But I found that is the perfect happy medium for most people. It's not such a high line count that it gives you those crazy scan lines. but it's still way better than your average consumer grade TV was. So going past that, I don't really know. If you have the ability to pick one up, see it and think about it. But I personally wouldn't suggest anybody go on a hunt for these, because all you're going to find these days are scammers or people who bought it originally for like 20 grand and expect 20 grand for it, which is fair because they don't know any better. They don't know how much these things have dropped and then gone back up in price. Or you'll find people that, they're about to list one, they see the buzzwords of retro gaming on others, and they try to charge you a lot. I've heard rumors of one person who has a few of these that's sitting on them, just letting them rot in a warehouse, specifically because they're waiting on the prices to go up even more, and then they're going to just post them for an insane amount of money. So I hate that. I want people that run tournaments. I want people that have museums. I want these things used by people that will appreciate it, and not, if you want to hoard one away in your house, that's cool too. Take good care of it. Make sure it goes to the right place whenever you're done with it. But just sitting in a storage area rotting makes me want to cry. So, unless you've already seen one and you've decided that this is the end all be all, you need to have it, then I wouldn't even bother looking. I maybe would just leave an eBay search reminder up, but good luck on eBay. Who knows what you're going to find? Most of the scams you find are on eBay. There's been plenty out there where you buy one monitor and what arrives is not the monitor that you purchased, I just had a bunch of this stuff happen. The picture is this beautiful monitor. It was shipped perfectly, and it arrived, and it was definitely not the same monitor. Stuff was broke on it. Another one, they shipped it tube down with just like one layer of bubble wrap, and the bezel was cracked, and they generously offered me $20 back. It's like, so yeah, I don't know, I don't know that it's worth going on a hunt. I think you'll just frustrate yourself. If you have a lot of money to spend and you really want to, let me know and I could try to put you in touch with a few people that might have them for sale. But you got to be realistic. This is like collecting classic cars now. You want just like a kind of a worn down old car that you could restore. I'll find you a bunch of PVMs in many different conditions to fit your price range. Maybe it's not even working, but it's got a great tube, so you could restore it. Or maybe it's already been restored and you're paying top dollar. Just think of classic cars. It's the same thing nowadays, and it deserves to be. So yeah, I don't know. I think I pretty much rambled for 5 minutes and didn't actually answer any of your questions. Should you go on the quest for the Holy Grail BVM? Probably not. And which looks better? What's the best balance? Whatever your eyes think are the best balance. And that might even differ per game console. So hopefully I've added a little perspective, even though I didn't actually answer anything. One more from Patton Thompson, and I'm going to be equally as useless this time. Any 4K or 1080p projectors you can recommend for retro gaming? I just don't have the ability to test projectors. I did at one point in my life when I was going to CEDIA and CES and all these things, but I have no way to set up or test any of that stuff. So this is one of those things that you should check forums, or maybe people in the comments here might be able to help. But I got nothing. I would just look up low lag gaming projectors and see if you could talk to people that have similar models and see if they work with the OSSC or the FrameMeister. Retro Tinker had replied in regards to the discussion last week about the weird hiss sound coming out of the Genesis. I had asked what the CCAM was, and he clarified it's the Crystal Clear Audio Mod. So there is already an audio mod in that. So, and you also clarified that the sound didn't seem to be coming from the Sega CD unit at all. It was only coming when you linked it through the Genesis. So, just by process of elimination, I would say check the Crystal Clear Audio Mod first. Try a triple bypass. And I'm only saying that because anything could always have a problem with it, no matter where you get it from. And anything hand built, there's always more of a chance. And I'm not accusing anybody or trying to be rude. People make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. Maybe whoever built yours, or maybe even you built it, maybe you just used the wrong resistor or something. I just accidentally did that to Jose probably 4 times in a row, where I got all of the components for something and got one wrong resistor, and luckily he had some. So if he wasn't paying attention, he would have installed like a 47K instead of a 4.7K resistor. And then, you know, somebody who, he didn't do anything wrong, I did, doesn't matter, end customer would have gotten something wrong. So just don't forget, mistakes happen. Luckily, Jose's smart enough to catch all my mistakes, but whatever. I would just check that. And, you know, the only other thing is if it's coming out of the Sega CD and not through the Genesis, just trace everything through. You might be able to I think Firebrand X once had like pins, and he was tapping audio at different points to try to see where exactly the audio was introduced. That's always a good thing. And of course, whatever output cable you're using, make sure you get a good shielded cable from a reputable manufacturer. But please keep us posted on that, because that's pretty interesting. And I'm really not sure what could have caused that. So hopefully it's something as easy as there's a weird issue with the crystal clear audio mod, one little tweak and it's fixed. Who knows? But yeah, keep us posted. That's pretty interesting. Robert Dickinson was also following up with the discussion last week. His was the problem where he had two Dreamcasts and one worked and one didn't with the Toro. So I guess I had misunderstood exactly what the issue was, and he clarified that the Toro and his primary Dreamcast work fine with both RGB Scart and VGA, but the second Dreamcast doesn't work with VGA. So this is a problem I just ran into where one of my Dreamcasts stopped outputting 5 volts. So when you were just getting RGBS, I was testing Dan's new solution. When you were just getting RGBS, his cable just passed that through and it worked perfect because, I mean, it's just RGBS. But when I was testing 480p, that wouldn't work because that accessed the sync combiner, which is powered by 5 volts. So I recommend that he check the fuses that are right next to the multi-out. So if you take your whole Dreamcast apart, you take the metal shield off the top, right by the multi-out, you'll be able to see a bunch of fuses in a row, and you should be able, if that's the issue, you'd be able to use a multimeter, and 3 out of the 4 will beep and 1 won't. That should be the 5-volt fuse. I left a link for that. That wasn't the issue with mine. Dan was nice enough to send me another Dreamcast motherboard. I took them both apart, and I had my original, and all 4 of the fuses were fine. They were not blown. So I just swapped it out, used Dan's motherboard, and I'll probably give Jose the other Dreamcast for parts. So if he ends up fixing that for whatever reason, I'll let you know what the problem was. But to be honest, in situations like that, it's often easier and a better use of parts to use that as a parts Dreamcast. Somebody blows out their video chip, you can swap that out, whatever else. But, it's an interesting problem. So if you yourself fix it, definitely let me know. Or if you were able to get into those little points with a multimeter and test for voltage, that might be your answer as well. Mr. Jeremiah Crabfeet asked if I'm aware of any recommended VGA connector multi-switches. So I always default to the Extron stuff. A lot of people I know use them. They were very expensive new and very high-end stuff, designed where quality really would matter. So I would go with them first. I used a brand called ATEN, A-T-E-N. They had a 16-port VGA switch that you had to run C-Sync. You couldn't run composite video or Luma S-Sync. And I think there was some signal degradation, but at the time that I was using it, I really just needed a 16-port switch badly, so it solved the problem with that. But I would stick with the Extrons because you can get them cheap on eBay. And even if you could only find like a 4-port switch to start, it might at least get you a taste of what it is that you're trying to do. Because depending on how many consoles you have hooked up together, the Extron crosspoints might actually be the perfect, that might be the perfect use case, a mix of RGB and VGA all through the same switch. So check those out on eBay and see if you find one that fits your needs best. And just make sure to pay attention to the audio options on each if you even need that, because some have them, some don't, and you can't add it after the fact, and you can't run audio through like the HV ports or something if you're just using RGB or YPBPR. That was a trick that somebody had tried, and that won't work either. So, but Extron is definitely the brand on eBay I would search for if you're looking for a decent price to use stuff. Christian Meath had a question. I'm going to answer the question first, but I also want to explain a little bit about why. So just the question. He recently pre-ordered Retro Gaming Cable's Dreamcast Scart cable and was wondering if it'll work on his Sony BVM D20 in 480p mode. So the short answer to your question is that will not. That's the one use case scenario that it will not work in. You'll need the retro access one if you want to stick to a SCART solution like that. So a little bit more of details on that. I'm going to try to make this as easy as I can to explain, because it does get confusing. Both cables from retro access and retro gaming cables, as well as the SCART output from the Behar Brothers solution, will work on absolutely every switch that, every OSSC, the FrameMeister. They will all work on pretty much every device in retro gaming, except a BVM or a PVM that works in 480p mode. For that, at the moment, the only SCART solution that does that is the retro access one designed by Dan, Citrus 3000 PSI. So, unfortunately, for that one specific use case, 480p on a Sony monitor, you're going to need to get the other one. I talked to Rob about it. He said he's going to try to update the sync combining circuit in there, but it can't be easy. Otherwise, every other solution out there would have fixed it by now. So unfortunately, that's bad news for your current solution. But luckily, there is another answer. You could just get the retro access one for now. I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that, because I don't want people throwing away their perfectly good Toros because they think it might not work. There's different scenarios. There's different ways to use all these things. But directly from G-Scart, Dreamcast G-Scart to your D20, you're gonna have the same problem that all of the other boxes have. You would have to run that through an RGB Extron device, which is kind of a pain to do with a SCART cable. You would want a Toro for that, or once again, just the retro access cable. So sorry I don't have better news, but it's cool that we have all these different options now. And if you had previously owned a different solution like the Toro or any of the Behar Brothers, they're still super useful devices, just not 480p RGBS into a Sony 480p compatible monitor. The GOAT said they have a GCHD Mark II, the latest dual output Eon device for the GameCube, and it works on the BVM D32 in 480p, but not in 240p. So, the D32 being a multi-format, I think a lot of times when that happens, it's the opposite. People will try it in 240p, and the GCHD Mark II will automatically have line doubling turned on, so it'll be outputting 480p to a 15 kilohertz only monitor. But I've never heard of the opposite happening, which is kind of interesting. So my first suggestion would be try it directly into the BVM. If you have any switch, remove the switch. Make sure you're using a cable that's designed for that. It could be that you've just tried to use a random cable that wouldn't work. Check out whatever Dan and Eon say. I believe it's just a straight up SCART cable for the Wii. I don't think it's anything special, but I would double check that without a doubt. And if you do have a switch, especially like the new G-Scart, try toggling sync regeneration on or off, see if that works or anything like that. But overall, if they said Dan's looking into it, I was just talking to Dan the other day about monitor incompatibilities, and he bought himself the most incompatible monitor I have ever seen. I own 2 of them now. I had 3. I'm just sold one to a buddy, and it's amazing for testing because you just learn so much about it. So if there is an issue that's not related directly to your setup, I'm sure Dan will find it very quickly. And if not, just maybe check some of the things that I mentioned. And I have a Mark II somewhere over here. I just don't know where, and I haven't even opened it. It's still sealed in the box because Eon sent it to me, and then we were supposed to meet up or something, and then they blew me off, so I never opened it up because I was going to talk with them about it either on camera or something, and I never got around to it. So I'll try to crack mine open if I have time to, but I think Dan will probably reply before I do. So good luck, and if it's something not related to your setup, or actually just keep us posted. BVM D-Series owners will always run into weird issues like this, so not often, but it'll happen. So keep everybody posted, please. Jeremiah Jackson asked, Will plugging the new retro gaming cable's Dreamcast cable into the FrameMeister result in the incorrect sample rate at 480p? So that will depend on the FrameMeister. I'm not an expert with it. Firebrand X is definitely the one that dug into all that stuff. But the video processors should be able to handle that and should process it correctly. The OSSC definitely will. You just have to make sure to use the correct settings. The correct settings on the OSSC might not be compatible with all monitors or TVs, so then you have to back it off until it's just about right. But that's not at all a problem related to the cable. It is just strictly related to the Dreamcast and the way it outputs analog video in 480p. I know that wasn't your question. For anybody listening that might not be aware, that's absolutely not a fault in any of the cables. That's the Dreamcast's weirdness itself. And you might even notice that if you have just a VGA monitor and you send it a 640 by 480 signal or a 720 by 480 signal and the Dreamcast, you could see how it reacts a little different. It's just way easier to deal with on a 4x3 CRT because you can just move the controls around a little bit. So, yeah, I think the FrameMeister profiles might handle that correctly. The FrameMeister isn't the best at 480p, but it does it well enough. It's just a tricky scenario. So my strong suggestion, if you love Dreamcast and you'll be playing on any kind of digital display or digital capture card, definitely get the DC HDMI. If you're just a casual Dreamcast user, or if you can't afford it at the moment, any of these other cable solutions are great, and you of course now could utilize it on analog equipment too. But definitely for all of these reasons, if you find yourself gaming a lot on a Dreamcast, it's really worth it to spend the extra money because it's a noticeable jump in everything. Just even if you don't notice the differences I pointed out in my video right away, you'll certainly eventually be able to realize certain things, certain quirks. I don't really know the best way to explain it. Once you try it, if you love the Dreamcast, you'll notice the difference. If you don't love the Dreamcast, you'll just think it looks clearer. But either way, if you got the money to spend, that's a way better solution. Pablo Romero asked if I'd been following the noise issues on the latest revision of the SSD S3. It seems to be console or setup dependent, and some people find it unplayable while others don't even hear it. So the short answer to your question is no, I haven't been following it all, but in shooting that video and in doing all the research on it, I found that very often you have two identical PC Engine or TurboGrafx consoles that perform completely different. I saw it a lot more with the video issues, obviously because it's a lot easier for me to spot that and by recording and all that stuff. But I had one model, my Core Graphics 2, through the OSSC. I couldn't get a signal most of the time through any solution. Through the SSD S3, the graphics booster, Voltar's internal amp, none of them would work right. And I eventually got the OSSC tweaked enough. But I've had other people just load up Firebrand X's profile, set the phase, and they're done, and they never drop ever. So it's very strange, the differences, and I'm not even really sure why, to be honest with you. But that would be my gut feeling, is that if you're hearing of two people buying off the same batch, and one has zero problems and the other have a lot, it probably is just going to come down to the weirdness with the PC engines. One thing I don't think you'll ever be able to get rid of is the noise when the SD card's being accessed, but that's not constant. And the problem with that noise, that specific noise, which may or may not be what they're talking about, you really mostly hear SD access noise when you select your game and hit the button and you see it, you see the progress meter fill up. And the big issue with that, of course, is there's nothing else, there's no other sound coming out. So now you're just sitting there looking at a blank screen, waiting for your thing to load, hearing this noise. So, of course, that's going to be a lot more noticeable there than other places. So that could be it. It could be at least in a few scenarios where somebody loads this thing up, they load their game, they hear the SD card buzz, and then they don't hear it at all when the game starts, both because the music's much louder than the sound, or maybe the sound's not even there anymore. So that is certainly another thing with it. But I mean, for all of the drama, it seems like they decided to fix the problems and are continuing to fix the problems. So, nothing's ever going to be perfect with old consoles, and certainly not with a PC engine. But it seems like, it seems like something that you could buy knowing that if you have a problem, it's not because of, probably not because of your purchase. It's probably just because, we're trying to make old consoles do stuff they weren't meant to do. Elmer M had two questions. First, I want to start future-proofing by making backup ROMs and ISOs of my collection. Where do I start? Well, I would start with a ROM dumper. So the Teensy Cartridge Dumper is an open source project from DB Electronics. That's probably a good place to start looking, at least. There's also one that's USB based that I think people have been using that with emulation that works well, that might support more consoles at the moment. But dumping ROMs are going to be simpler because you just, simpler on a software side, harder on the hardware side, because you'll actually need a few different tools to do so. And how you dump the ROMs on the software side is based upon which hardware you use. But most of them I think are command line, but it's pretty easy stuff. I would just research what hardware solution you'd prefer and kind of go from there. As for ISOs, you're lucky in that you could just use a CD-ROM drive. But each console will have a different best practice. And I think, and of course there's other myths out there that may or may not be true, like you're supposed to rip the game at the same speed it's read on by the original console. Technically, at least based on the knowledge I have, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But burning it might, but whatever. I would just follow what other people have been doing that seems to be proven results. For me personally, the two things that would matter to me, one, a completely ridiculous one, is that if I have my favorite game that I've been playing forever, it's still in good condition, I would love the ROM or ISO of that just because. And that's ridiculous. I know it's crazy. There's no reason behind it. But the other thing that I always do, which is not crazy, or too crazy, is that I make sure that whatever method of ripping the disc, you got to make sure that the audio quality is as good as possible. And that's where you need to just do a little bit of research into, are there known burners that are good or bad? I say burners because you probably can't even get a CD reading drive anymore. They're probably all just write drives. But I do, like I have all of my, years ago when I still had CDs, I ripped them all. And you could still hear like skipping or popping on some of the rips because the disc was dirty. I did a super fast rip. That's more technical. That makes technical sense to me. If you're trying to rip something at 52x, maybe if you slowed it down to like 16x, it could have, it might have been easier for it to read the data. 1x doesn't make any sense to me, but just make sure good practice for the audio, because getting the game's data right should be a fairly easy process if the disc is in decent shape, but you definitely want to make sure that you have good audio. So that, I would just look up other people's guides. If Firebrand X hears this and isn't too busy, he's been pretty busy lately, but maybe he has guides that he's been following in the past, because he's certainly one to not skimp on audio quality at all. So maybe that, if he hears this, maybe he'd post. If not, I'll try to find a link for you, but it's pretty much it on that end. And as far as your other question, you tuned in for the Virtual Boy live stream. It was cool to see it through different colors. Blue is one of your favorite colors, mine too, but it made things look dark and hid details, but the other ones seemed to work fine. So that was a 4.5-hour stream. I mentioned this once or twice, but I would not expect anybody to have luckily been there when I said it. When I was setting the stream up, I had to calibrate the capture card, and I was able to calibrate each color individually fine, but I needed to find a happy medium that all the colors would look decent. So, red is always my favorite for Virtual Boy. In the red that you saw in the stream, I could have made a little bit better. Just once again, I needed to be happy medium for all the colors. I also felt that on stream, black and white really, really came out good. I'm not sure why. I still get the sense of depth, but it looked cool, looked good. And I didn't really like most of the other colors at all. However, and I think blue and yellow are my least favorite. And that includes when on an RGB monitor and when I was calibrating the capture card for each just to see how they would look. Even calibrated at the right brightness, I didn't like blue. But don't forget, everybody's eyes perceive color different. Your setup might be different. So if you get a virtual tap installed into your Virtual Boy, I would take the time to play it a little bit on each color to see what's your favorite. It does not change the color inside the Virtual Boy. This is only for RGB monitors or VGA monitors or whatever, however you're streaming. But even in person, I found that I liked red on the RGB monitor the best because it felt like Virtual Boy, which is not a scientific answer here, but I had it set up so that the spare Virtual Boy head was sitting on top of the PVM, so people would turn the corner when they came downstairs, they'd see the Virtual Boy, they'd see the PVM on running all red, and anybody who had seen a Virtual Boy before, it subconsciously clicked immediately to them. So, cycle through whatever your favorite color is, but I'm going to consistently stay on red in most cases, both for that subconscious connection to you're watching Virtual Boy, and because I genuinely think red and white were the best colors on stream, and I wish I could have taken the time to calibrate and show each color separately. Maybe one day I'll just do a full virtual tap review. I got to budget my time as wisely as possible, and I felt it was cooler for everybody to do something like that live stream. So hopefully I could circle back around to more Virtual Boy stuff soon, but definitely get a virtual tap installed if you like it, and give each color a chance. Well, that's almost it for this week. I just wanted to mention once again, new camera, new audio setup. So the audio should be identical. If it's somehow way worse or way better, please let me know, but that should be the same. As for the camera, I still have to work out mounting and focus. And once again, for my fellow camera and video nerds, the focus issue is because I switched to the Sony a6300 for this stuff. I was mainly using the a6000, which while it can't do 4K and a few other things, the autofocus wasn't as good, which worked better for me because I leave everything in full auto for these videos. I record in front of a window, I got lights on, but things are always changing, and it's so much better for me to just do it all auto. Unfortunately, as far as I can find on the a6300, going all auto means focus is all auto as well. You can't change the focal zone, whereas if I went manual, I could take the little square box and just place it wherever my face is about to be, and then that's where about the focus would be. So kind of interesting. If anybody's an expert with the 6300, let me know. But other than that, just how else was everything? And for the mounting, is this a decent angle? I was trying really hard to get a new mount for my setup, and some didn't work, some fell over, some were, it was just a total pain. So any thoughts on any of this stuff? Is looking up like this weird, good, bad? As always, I really like to hear everybody's feedback. Everybody's been really amazing and helpful, and I've tried to improve as a result. So please let me know what you think of all this stuff. And as soon as I get that solved, just these last little bits, I will do a full room and setup tour. I'll kind of do like an overview, like a quick 5-minute overview, and that will be for supporters only. And then let me know, is there something you want to see more or less of? If I spend 2 minutes on a switch and nobody cares, but I only spend 30 seconds on a camera mount, who knows? Definitely let me know all of that. And one more question for all of you. I've been putting the subscriber supporter videos only up on YouTube, but if you would like, I can also put them on the other platforms I've been using, Library, LBRY, I think that's how you say it, and BitChute. I've had good luck with both platforms. They're both a little different, but it's just a way to host videos that's not YouTube. YouTube is amazingly convenient. The apps work well, but there's a lot of stuff around it that annoys people. So if everybody wants, I'll start uploading the Q&As and some of the upcoming new content that's going to be subscriber only. I could upload those on the other platforms as well. If you don't care, I'll just stick with YouTube because it's easier, and I always have the backup files of everything, so if something should ever happen, I could always grab these and put them up elsewhere. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for participating in these. I enjoy doing them. I try to give back to all of the supporters in any way that I possibly can, so hopefully this is decent. And any questions at all you have for next time, just answer them wherever is the newest video on any of the support platforms. I can't really go back and check on any of them, so it's the way it's set up. Any questions at all, just ask in the latest video on the platform, and I'll get to you next week. Thanks as always, and I'll see you next time.